How does a poor boy born in a one-room house in Scotland, earning just $1.20 a week, rise to become one of the richest men the world has ever seen? This is not just a story of money. It is a story of vision, courage, struggle, and generosity. The boy's name was Andrew Carnegie. He arrived in America with nothing in his pockets. No education, no connections, just hope. Through endless hours of hard work, smart choices, and a powerful belief in the future, he built the largest steel empire the world had ever seen. His company supplied the steel that built railroads, bridges, and skyscrapers, the very backbone of modern America. They called him the Steel King of America, a man whose factories could shape the destiny of a nation. But Carnegie's story is not only about rising to unimaginable wealth. It is about what he chose to do with it. Because in the end, he gave away nearly all his fortune to build libraries, universities, and opportunities for people who, like him, were once poor and searching for a chance. So let us step back in time to see how a young immigrant boy transformed his life from poverty to power and finally to philanthropy. This is the incredible journey of Andrew Carnegie. Andrew Carnegie's story begins in the small town of Dunfermline, Scotland, in the year 1835. He was born into a modest family in a tiny house with just one main room. His father, William Carnegie, was a handloom weaver, a skilled craft at the time. For generations, weaving had provided families with a steady income and dignity. But then came the Industrial Revolution. Machines began replacing hand weavers, and one by one, men like William lost their livelihoods. The sound of the loom grew quieter, and so did the hope of families like the Carnegies. Andrew's mother, Margaret Carnegie, tried desperately to keep the family afloat. She worked odd jobs, sewing, mending, even selling food door to door, anything to put bread on the table. But it was never enough. Poverty pressed hard on the family. The young Andrew often watched his father worry in silence, his pride broken by the loss of his craft. For the Carnegies, every day became a struggle for survival. By the late 1840s, with little hope left in Scotland, the family made a bold decision. They would leave everything they knew behind and start over in America, a land they believed was full of opportunity. In 1848, Andrew, just 13 years old, boarded a ship with his parents and younger brother. The journey across the Atlantic was long and difficult, crowded with immigrants chasing the same dream, a better life. When they finally arrived in Allegheny, Pennsylvania, the reality was harsh. America was not a land of instant riches. The Carnegies found themselves living in a cramped house, barely scraping by. Work was scarce, food was limited, and the struggle for survival continued. For Andrew, the lesson was clear. If he wanted to escape poverty, he would need to work harder than anyone else. He would need to seize every opportunity, no matter how small. And soon, at the age of 13, he took his very first job in America, earning just $1.20 a week. In Allegheny, Pennsylvania, life demanded that even children work. At just 13 years old, Andrew Carnegie took his first job as a bobbin boy in a cotton mill. The hours were brutal, 12 hours a day, 6 days a week. His job was to change spools of thread in the factory machines, a task that was dangerous, exhausting, and mind-numbing. For all this effort, he earned just $1.20 a week, barely enough to help keep food on the family's table. The noise of the machines was deafening, the air filled with dust, and accidents were common. But Andrew did not complain. He understood that every penny mattered, and deep inside he carried a determination. This was only the beginning. A few years later, Andrew found an opportunity that would change his life. He was hired as a messenger boy at a telegraph office. To others, it was just another low-paying job. But Andrew treated it like a golden chance. He studied the city maps until he knew every street by heart. He memorized the names and faces of important businessmen, and most impressively, he taught himself to recognize telegraph signals by sound, instead of looking at the printed tape, a rare skill at that time. At night, after long working hours, Andrew refused to waste his free time. He borrowed books from the library of a kind man named Colonel James Anderson, who allowed working boys to read from his collection. Carnegie devoured books on history, literature, and business. These late-night reading sessions became his real education, an education no school had given him. Through sheer focus and dedication, Andrew was soon promoted to telegraph operator. This was no small achievement for a poor immigrant boy. It was his first real step up the ladder of opportunity, a job that connected him with influential people, sharpened his mind, and showed him that knowledge could be his greatest tool. From the dark, dusty floor of a cotton factory to the buzzing energy of a telegraph office, Andrew Carnegie was already proving that no matter where you start, it's how you learn and adapt that defines where you'll go. By the mid-1800s, Andrew Carnegie had already built a foundation of wealth through railroads and smart investments. But he was not satisfied. He was searching for something bigger, an industry that could shape the future. That's when he saw the growing promise of steel. At the time, steel was expensive and difficult to produce. Most construction relied on iron, which was weaker and less durable. But then came the Bessemer process, a revolutionary new method that made steel production faster, cheaper, and more efficient. Where others hesitated, Carnegie acted. He recognized that steel would soon become the backbone of modern civilization. With boldness and vision, he began building steel plants and invested heavily in the new process. But Carnegie had a secret weapon, his strategy of reinvestment. Instead of spending his profits on luxury, he poured almost every dollar back into his business, building new mills, improving technology, and expanding production. He also pioneered what later became known as vertical integration. Carnegie didn't just own steel mills. He took control of every step in the process, from the iron or mines that supplied raw material, to the railroads and ships that transported it, to the factories that shaped it into beams and rails. By cutting out middlemen, he slashed costs and maximized efficiency. The results were astonishing. Within a few decades, Carnegie's company, Carnegie Steel, had become the largest and most powerful steel company in the world. His factories supplied the steel that built America's railroads, bridges, and skyscrapers. Cities rose higher, trains moved faster, and America transformed into an industrial giant, all powered by Carnegie Steel. His success earned him the nickname, the Steel King. But this title was not just about wealth, it was about influence. Carnegie's decisions shaped entire industries, changed the American economy, and laid the foundation for the modern world. For the boy who once worked 12 hours a day in a cotton mill, this was an unimaginable triumph. Andrew Carnegie had proven that vision, discipline, and bold risks could turn poverty into unimaginable power. But what made him truly unforgettable was not just how he made his fortune, it was what he chose to do with it. By the dawn of the 20th century, Andrew Carnegie stood at the peak of his success. His company, Carnegie Steel, dominated the industry, producing more steel than all of Great Britain combined. But in 1901, Carnegie made a decision that shocked the world. He sold his empire to financier J.P. Morgan for the staggering sum of $480 million, the largest business deal in history at that time. Overnight, Carnegie became one of the richest men on earth. And then, he walked away. Unlike many who cling to power and wealth, Carnegie believed his true mission had only just begun. He was guided by a philosophy he called the gospel of wealth. In his view, the rich had a moral duty, not to die with fortune, but to use it for the betterment of society. He once declared, "The man who dies rich, dies disgraced." So Carnegie set out to give his wealth away, carefully, thoughtfully, and with purpose. He funded the construction of more than 2,500 public libraries across the world, believing that knowledge should be free for everyone, especially poor boys who, like him, hungered for education. He established the Carnegie Institute of Technology, which later became Carnegie Mellon University, a center for innovation and learning. He also supported universities, research centers, cultural institutions, and even initiatives for world peace. Carnegie's philanthropy was not random charity, it was an investment in humanity. He wanted to create opportunities, to open doors, to ensure that the next generation of dreamers had the tools to rise above poverty. By the time of his death in 1919, Carnegie had given away nearly 90% of his fortune, the modern equivalent of billions of dollars. What remained was not just wealth, but a legacy of generosity that continues to shape lives more than a century later. The boy who once worked in a cotton mill for $1.20 a week had become one of history's greatest givers. His steel built America's cities, but his philanthropy built America's future. And so, Andrew Carnegie's life leaves us with a powerful reminder: true success is not measured by how much wealth you keep, but by how much good you create with it. The story of Andrew Carnegie is more than just a tale of rags to riches. It is a lesson, a roadmap, for anyone who dreams of transforming their life. Carnegie's journey reminds us that hard work opens doors. From a cotton mill bobbin boy to a messenger, from long nights of reading borrowed books, to mastering the telegraph, every step was built on relentless effort. He proved that no beginning is too small if you refuse to give up. But hard work alone is not enough. Carnegie discovered a truth that changed his destiny. A salary will feed you, but investments will free you. By reinvesting his earnings and taking bold risks, he turns small opportunities into a massive fortune. He teaches us that true wealth doesn't come from what you earn. It comes from how wisely you grow and use it. And yet, the most powerful part of his story lies in what he did after reaching the top. Carnegie showed the world that real success comes not from keeping wealth, but from giving it back. His libraries, universities, and institutions became doors of opportunity for millions who would never meet him, but who would be touched by his generosity. His philosophy was simple, yet timeless. The man who dies rich, dies disgraced. In the end, Carnegie's legacy is not measured in steel mills or money. It is measured in knowledge shared, futures built, and lives changed. So when we look at Andrew Carnegie's life, the lesson is clear. Don't just chase money, chase impact. Because wealth, when used for progress, becomes more than fortune. It becomes history.